Okay, hello everybody. Good evening and welcome to our second part of our two-part webinar series. My name is Leah, and can everybody hear me? Awesome. So my name is Leah and I am here helping to host this webinar. I work at the Georgia Campaign for Adolescent Power and Potential, also known as GCAP. And GCAP works with over hundreds of schools, youth serving professionals, parents, and youth across Georgia. So we work to ensure that young people have the information, knowledge, and motivation they need to make healthy lifestyle choices that maximize their potential. So today, our webinar will focus on what every parent needs to know about supporting your LGBTQ+ youth. Actually, that was our first title. What was today's title? Something about rainbows. So I'm glad y'all are here today to talk with our panelists. So I'm going to first review some group agreements that I have up on the screen. So I want to make sure that while we're here, we all feel like we have a welcome space where everyone feels comfortable sharing and learning. So this is a safe space. We want to respect everyone's identities and experiences. We want to listen actively. We want to avoid making any assumptions or stereotypes, and then make sure that you put all the questions you have in the Q&A box, and any comments you have can go in the chat box. You all should be able to chat now. So if any of the attendees want to try to write in the chat, so we can make sure that's working. I know last time we were having troubles with that, but if you can make sure you're just keeping these group agreements in mind while we are here today. So just to review oh yay, we got somebody saying stuff in the chat. So to recap day one. So day one, our panelists told us that we want to make sure that as parents, regardless of our child's LGBTQ+ identities, we want to show them that we love them and respect them. If you don't understand something, make sure that we ask questions out of curiosity and compassion and not from a space of judgment. And then one thing that was really important is coming out to a parent that you don't think will support you can be really scary. And so the number one thing that teens are most afraid of about coming out to their parents is that their parents will they fear that their parents will no longer love them. So we want to make sure that we are supporting our parents, our teens with their identities, even if we don't understand. So I'm going to introduce my four lovely panelists today. So we have two panelists that are on our Youth Advisory Council. So our Youth Advisory Council is for youth ages 14 through 24 all across Georgia. And these youth do really awesome things in their community to put plans into action plans into place for something they're really passionate about in their community. So starting with our two Youth Advisory Council members, I have Morgan Cosby. She is currently a senior at Arabia Mountain High School in DeKalb County. And after high school, she plans on studying to become an adolescent clinical psychologist specializing in people of color and LGBTQ+ youth. In her free time, she enjoys thrifting, reading, working out, baking, and watching new shows. We also have Ainsley Cooper. She has been a GCAP YAC member since 2021. She's also a student in Gwinnett County Public Schools and a leader both within and outside of her community. As a bisexual teenage girl, she hopes to serve as a support system to everyone who needs it. We also have Heather Cooper, who is Ainsley's mom. And she is a veteran educator of over 21 years, a high school behavior intervention specialist, and a proud and supportive queer mom. She has a PhD in adult learning and development and is the author of a book, The Teacher's Closet. And we also have Elise Schuster, who is a sexuality educator and youth development professional. They have a master's in public health and are the co-founder of OK So, a free app that connects young people with questions about identity, relationships, sexual health, and more experts who provide personalized support and information. And we also have GCAP staff on OK So if you want to ask us any anonymous questions. So now that you have met your panelists, if you can write one thing in the chat that you're hoping to gain from this webinar, we would love to hear from you. While you're doing that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Okay, awesome. All right, so while we're waiting to hear from our lovely attendees about something they're wanting to learn from this webinar, I'm going to start with some questions. So I'm going to ask all of my panelists, our panelists, some questions, and whoever wants to start, we can just go for it. And I realize I got the wrong questions. So give me 1 second. Glad I put these in the thing. Okay, awesome. Here they are. Okay, so are these the right ones? Why am I confused today? Somebody help me. Okay, I found them. So why is it important for parents of LGBTQ+ youth to advocate for community support outside of their home? Anybody?
I don't quite know how to answer this question, but I'm going to try my best. So I would say because your kid has to live in this world too. And so if your kid sees you treating somebody poorly, they're going to see that as a reflection of how you would treat them. Like say they're in the closet and you treat a LGBT person bad, that may make them fear coming out more.
I might also add, I think that we, of course, we want young people to develop the skills to be their own advocates. I know we talked about that last week as something that, is important, but also sometimes young people are not given the respect that they deserve. And so sometimes as adults, it's helpful for us to step in. I think also that, it can be like having to advocate for yourself all the time and show up for yourself can be really exhausting. And so as parents, it can be really helpful for us to think about and talk with our young people about all the different kinds of spaces that they might be sort of interacting, right? So school and after school activities, church, camp, family members, there's like so many different places where this could potentially be coming up. And if you think about a young person who's having to kind of navigate each of those spaces, it might be, really just wonderful to not have to do that, but to maybe have some help or to be able to talk things through, or to even have, there might be times when someone might, your kiddo might want you to handle it so that they don't have to, because it just is hard to do all the time.
Awesome. Thank you, Morgan and Elise. So my next question is, how can parents talk to community members, neighbors, school personnel, etc., about supporting their LGBTQ teens?
I think the one thing we can do is just be visible and proud. It doesn't always have to be a big situation, a big coming out of sorts. It's just about education. When the need arises type thing, have conversation, and they're courageous conversations because we live in the South. Another way that we can advocate for our teens is going to the school board and really advocate for the rights. We know that there's all sorts of judgments, not just about gender identity, sexuality, but all sorts of things that our teens are dealing with. So coupling those things together can be really devastating without the support of parents. And so I think, again, giving yourself grace, but also being their cheerleader and their support system is really important.
I think also, one of the things that there's actual sort of research on this, and that is a tactic that people use, but is really trying to, especially if you're talking to someone who is maybe more sort of hostile or further away from understanding than you would like them to be, is really to connect on shared values first as part of that conversation. So, things like love, safety, there may be other things that, you can sort of agree, like, do we agree that these things are important? And then it really becomes like, this is how we are doing that for our child in our family. That's what this looks like for us. And there's some sort of evidence that helps people sort of access a little bit more of the empathetic side of themselves instead of the sort of judgment or sort of just purely like statistics or information side, because you're sort of connecting on what you have in common. I think also, what Heather was saying too, is that there's just so many like misconceptions out there. So I think another thing can be just thinking through, like, what do you anticipate or what do you know are going to be maybe some of the most common things that people might say in response, and kind of think through ahead of time and maybe even write down how might you want to respond to that, so that you're not responding from a place of like feeling panicked or kind of almost like a knee-jerk reaction, but you have a response that you've spent time thinking about. You can even sort of tweak them as you go. And if you find something that feels like it works, come back and add that to what you've written down, so that you have kind of almost like a little database of how do you want to sort of explain things to folks. I also sort of hear people talking about using television or other media as a way of communicating as well. So if there's a show or music or an article or something like that, sometimes that can be a way in for folks that gives them a little bit of time to think on their own and can kind of help lower maybe some defensiveness that people might have, because they might just kind of get to watch something on their own and think about it and then come back to a conversation.
Yeah, I really love actually what you said about the preparing answers ahead of time, because I think that's something I know I struggle with sometimes. If somebody says something to me or asks me a question and I feel like in the moment like triggered, I want to answer out of like anger, but answering that way isn't always helpful for me or for them, because people don't respond well when you're being angry at them. And then also I love the idea about sharing like a show or maybe even like a YouTube video, because that can be an easy way to learn or to understand something when it's coming from somebody else, maybe in an educational format. So yeah, I love both of those. Thanks, Elise. And Heather. Does anyone else, other panelists, Morgan or Ansley, have any thoughts on that right now? No? Okay. So our next one, how and where can parents of LGBTQ+ youth find community support for themselves, specifically in Georgia or just in the United States?
I would say do research. Like if you have social media, that's a great resource that everybody uses. So you can use social media, look up certain hashtags, like say maybe LGBT Youth Atlanta. I'm sure if you look that up on Instagram or whatever social media, something will pop up and you'll be able to find little resources, workshops, whatnot. I know particularly in Atlanta, Lost and Found Youth, ATL, that's a really good resources. It's a shelter for homeless LGBT youth that may have been kicked out or have circumstances that have brought them there. Go to the pride parades, because of course you meet somebody. There's always different booths that both whether it be LGBT psychologists, LGBT centers, all that is always at Pride. And Pride is coming up, so definitely check that out. Maybe Trevor Project, Trevor Space. I know I found a lot of community on Trevor Space when I was first coming out. But other than that, I'm not quite sure. But I would just say social media would be your biggest resource.
I think for like parents who are parents of LGBTQ plus youth. Facebook, I know a lot of parents use that still to this day, and they have like groups on there because I know my mom's in a mom group for two moms of like or an IVF baby. So I think if you go on Facebook and you just type in whatever you want, I think a group will pop up of anybody in your area who's a part of this and who's dealing with the same situation. And I think you can find support through other parents, and it doesn't have to be like through an online organization. This can just be within your community. So finding stuff on Facebook might really help you. Like Morgan said, using social media is a pretty big key.
And word of mouth goes a long way too. I know it's, we always talk about it being family, and we like to find each other at daycares, in the mall, at grocery store. Not saying that I surround my whole family with like families. I like the diversity. I like being able to, especially I have a 2-year-old, and I want her to see all different kinds of families. That's really important to me. But I do, like Ainsley said, go on to, Two Moms Atlanta. It's a great support group. It's not really a support group. It's like just a bunch of moms, and we just get together and do like play things with our kids, right? But it's a nice outlet. And I'm sure that they have other groups for all ages. And it's that authentic experience of not reading it in a book or, listening on a podcast. It's like true life things when you're able to get together with family like that, and just be vocal about what you're looking for. It is difficult being an adult to make new friends. Being a high school teacher, I often tell my students, like, it's so much easier to be 15 or 16 and make friends versus being an adult. Being a mom is hard to find like people. So again, you'd be surprised where you can find support if you just are looking for it or asking for it.
I would also add a couple of other things, I think. So one is PFLAG, which is a national organization that has chapters all over the country. I know there's one in Georgia, and they do, a lot of them are doing virtual groups, like usually once a month, and then they have other articles and things like that that are available. Another is, local LGBTQ centers sometimes have things for parents or have things for young people. And then things like summer camps or after school groups or things like that can be a way that, whoever, if your kid is there, you can meet the other parents who are there, right? So I have a friend with a child who is non-binary, and she has a text group with all of her kids' camp friends' parents, right? And they're sort of all together on a text chain, and they live, within 50 miles of each other or something like that. So they don't always get to see each other, but they have this kind of group where they chat back and forth. So they've kind of built that because their kids all became friends at the same place. So that's sort of, a roundabout way, but a way that as parents, we, certainly I have friends who our kids were friends first. And then we became friends after. That's definitely a way that parents sometimes end up making friends. Something that we've been thinking about for OK So is actually one of our kind of ideas that we're working on is starting a website for parents of LGBTQ young people that would have webinars and resources and sort of like office hours where folks could gather and ask questions. So if that's something that folks would be interested in, I'd love to hear that, just so that we can kind of, or chat with anyone who'd be interested in that, just so as we're kind of building it, so we can figure out what that could look like. But we definitely need more things out there. I think it's, a lot of it is, yeah, there's more room, right? There's always more room for more community and connection.
Beautiful. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, so like Morgan, Heather, and Elise all said, there's so many resources online for parents to connect with each other, to connect with organizations. We do have a list of resources that Elise shared with us last time that we will send out after the webinar as well. this is coming up soon. So yeah, so many resources. So I did want to note that LGBTQ plus youth in Georgia are at a higher risk for homelessness. They're at a higher risk for facing discrimination and harassment at school, higher rates of its suicide attempts, facing barriers to healthcare. So we know that our LGBTQ plus youth are facing a lot of barriers, and then LGBTQ plus youth of color are facing even higher barriers. So, and our current legislation is not making these things easier. It's making them so much harder in Georgia and Florida, all across the entire country. So how does the current legislation in this country impact LGBTQ plus youth and their families?
I think it's very harmful because all of these governments are making decisions about your private life. So it's kind of like separation between like your government, like how they say separation between state and church. I feel like this is like an invasion of like your private life, and like, why is government being invaded? Because they have all these misconstrued thoughts about trans people and drag shows and stuff like that. So I think it's so harmful for the community and for young people because they're the ones that are being impacted. And I know suicide rates are very high for LGBTQ plus youth. So it's not making it any better. So, I mean, there's not much you can do because, I mean, these people are in office and it's life and it sucks, but
I would say to answer that question, on a personal level, it makes me, since I am a senior in high school, it makes me have to like look out at certain states and cross certain states off my list and all of that. And it makes me worry about traveling and staying in the US after undergraduate. Like literally with all of my colleges, I had to go on this website, Campus Pride, really good resource for future college students. And basically it has like a rating of how homophobic and tolerant each college campus is and each state is. So I had to cross off like a few of my dream schools off the list because they're in Tennessee. So, and Tennessee has passed a lot of those harmful laws. And it was always like my dream to have that college experience where I could be fully out and about, enjoying the nightlife, enjoying just like the day-to-day life. So it does make me worried to where I want to travel, even if it's academic wise or school wise. So that is a fear that I have to hold over my head.
You are definitely not alone in that. Morgan, I can tell you, that's something that we talk with folks about on Okay So. I think especially, people who are seniors who are trying to navigate where they might go next. There's so many different things now that people are trying to take into account that are happening in different states, and things are changing so quickly. And it feels really hard, I think, for folks to know how to make those decisions. I think the other thing I know that we see on Okay So is just that even if you don't live in a state where this legislation is being passed, it still impacts you. It impacts adults, right? Those of us who are part of the community who are adults, it has an impact on us too. I remember the day that Governor Abbott in Texas released the executive order, like that was sort of the very first one that kind of came, that happened about a little over a year ago. I didn't really work that day. Like I couldn't stop crying, right? It just felt, an attack on one of us is an attack on all of us, even if we don't live in that state, or even if it doesn't directly impact us. And there's actually Harvard does this poll every year, and they released the one from this past fall a couple of weeks ago. And in it, 72% of LGBTQ plus college students said they feel like their identity and their rights are under attack. 72%, right? So I'm actually shocked it's not higher, to be honest. So, really not seeing, right, the impact for everybody, But then I think also for folks who are in those states, it means not seeing yourself or your identity represented in your school or in your community. It means not getting the care or the support that you need in the most extreme sort of impact. And I am not being hyperbolic here. Like, this legislation will lead to the deaths of young people, either from suicide or from violence perpetrated by other people in their lives or strangers, right? This already happens without this legislation. And it's just sort of astounding to me that you see people testifying in these states and bringing this up, and it just, it doesn't seem to matter that this is legislation. It's legislation that is created under the guise of being helpful and keeping young people from harm, when in fact it is going to do the exact opposite. And I think that is what is just so devastating about it.
This for me is a really touchy topic. Being not only a mom, but being in education, being in the South, being a mom of now a toddler with all these things that are happening and changing, and it's frustrating. And the only thing we can do is be loud and proud and stand up for what we believe in and what our rights are. And we can't control what other people say and do, but we can control how we respond to those things. And I think that we just need to hold our head up high and be supportive and proud and advocate wherever possible. I always say it's mind blowing to me that the government wants to be so in depth in people's lives. It's so bizarre to me. So I guess that's all I have to say, because it's, like I said, I kind of like to stick my head under a rock and pretend it's not happening, because it's so frustrating. You feel like you want so many things to be different for your children and for the future of our children. And sometimes I feel like we're backpedaling faster than anything.
Yeah, it is really scary, because sometimes it feels like, what can we do when there's so much power and control over what we can and can't do with our bodies, because people want to control our bodies, essentially, when it has nothing to do with them. It has nothing to do with them when trans children want to have gender affirming surgeries. Only having these things is going to make people happier and healthier. But like I think Elise said, they are trying to make them sound like these things are harmful. So we really have to look into these bans and bills that are being passed, because a lot of times they use language like the the parental consent bill or something. It's making us think, oh, they're helping parents, but they're harming children, and it's harming parents as well. So it's really important to be aware of what's happening in our communities and in the legislation. Even if it's not in our state, it could be coming to our state, and it's still affecting people that we love. So speaking of church and state, like Ansley said, we kind of talked about last time how sometimes people who are part of the LGBTQ plus community can feel like they're not supported, and the faith community in particular. But how can the faith community also support you as an LGBTQ person, but still maintain their faith? if possible. I don't know.
I mean, it's another one of those things where it's just like a shaking of my head. I am from northern Minnesota. Minnesota is very different than down here in the South. And my mother just moved back here from northern Minnesota, and they joined a church, and they wanted us, her and my stepdad wanted us to go to church with them. And I would love to go to church, but I'm not going to bring my family into a church that we're not welcome to. So I always make contact with the leader of the church to ask what their belief system is. And I have been just saddened by the amount of the ignorant responses that come out. And again, I always hold true that I am in control of how I respond. And I want to say so many things and I don't. Thank you for the information. And I keep it moving. It's so difficult to the hypocrisy that is involved in the whatever kind of Christianity or belief that you might have about welcoming and no judgment. And there's just I deal with that now. Like, how do I teach my children that, it doesn't, the message is not clear. The message is not right. So again, when I come back and say, you don't have to be spiritual in a building, you find whatever feels comfortable to you and believe what you want to believe. And there are places, more so in the city, closer to the city, that have these buildings, if you will, churches that are affirming and are accepting. And, I had the pleasure of going to one, and it's just a different environment because guess what? We're not different. We're not different. We just blend right in and we're just accepted. And it's not this otherness that we're looking for. We're not looking to be othered. And so when you find that kind of happy medium, it's a really great fit.
I would also maybe add that, I think exactly that, which is that there are it's so complex, right? But there are some really, I think, amazing examples of faith communities that are affirming and embracing LGBTQ folks, and who are remembering that God is love, and that, right, and sort of what that can mean. And I think also just remembering that, especially for folks who maybe did not grow up. I grew up in a faith tradition that was not accepting at all, and that there is a lot of pain and trauma there for folks, and that people's relationship to faith can be really affected by that. So even someone who might find an affirming community, that might be really different for them depending on sort of what their history has been, right? And so I think even like an affirming community, just knowing that even that community is still part of a bigger like group of folks who, right, with whom people may have really complicated relationships. And so not just saying sort of like, oh, well, we're accepting, so everything is great, come on in, right? But understanding that person may need time or space, or maybe hesitant for really valid reasons. And so I think just, being able to remain loving and open and caring with folks. And yeah, I don't know. It is a tough and complicated thing, I think. And I'd love to hear if Morgan or Ansley have thoughts, as folks who are, I feel like Heather and I are like back in our childhoods in like some very real ways too, but would be curious to see what it feels like for both of you as well, sort of navigating this now in a different way.
I mean, I don't really have any like thoughts per se, but I can tell like there's a lot of like churches like to hide their like non-dominational, like they'd like to say that they're non-dominational when they're really not. So they kind of like hide the homophobia and the transphobia behind like their preaching style. So, and especially like to see like the kids you go to high school with and they're giving this like, oh, we love all, we respect all, like God loves everyone. And in reality that they really don't respect you and they think otherwise. So it's kind of like we can't judge what they think, but it's kind of like, when do you like cross the line at, do they really support who I am, or do they just want to push their belief on me that being bisexual is wrong and that I shouldn't be who I am because it's not what God wants. So it's hard.
Leah, can I go ahead and skip ahead to that question that I know you're going to ask me next?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so the question that Leah was going to ask me was, as an LGBTQ youth in the faith community, what has my experience been like with my family and my faith? Let's start this off. I'm Morgan, 17-year-old. I've been going to church. I've been going to church from ever since I was in my mom's belly up until about a year and a half ago. I've known I was queer since I was 5. I've been going to church consistently. I was a praise dancer for like 2 years, so I would say I was heavily involved in the church. But it all changed. It all changed when there's a sermon literally 2 months before quarantine. I would say I am a religious person, and I used to be more religious. But one time in the church, I was really digging the sermon that the guest pastor was preaching. But then, as Baptist pastors tend to go on, they were like, condemn all this, and then they said condemn all the gays, and then everybody around me was clapping and clapping and clapping. And then that's when I knew I couldn't go back to that church, and I haven't stepped foot back in that church in about a year and a half. So, and that was the last time I actually physically went to a church. So I would say I have a more personal relationship. I don't really feel comfortable going to churches anymore because of that particular experience. Which sort of changed because I did grow up faith-based community. I still do consider myself a Baptist Christian. It's just that experience kind of ruined the whole congregation thing for me, especially since knowing that I knew all these people. I grew up around these people, going to the little after church breakfast, chatting about life, them asking my grades. So, and I know a certain part of my family definitely wouldn't accept me because of that, because they are very strict religious people, and so it feels very hard trying to navigate my religion as well as my sexuality, which I don't think I can choose my religion. I can't choose my sexuality. I choose to try to intertwine them because that's how I was raised. Those are my personal beliefs. But what I find really harmful is that a lot of people think that once you come out, you still can't be a religious person, or those two can't coexist, when they can. It just may be a more personal relationship, or you may have to search a little bit harder to find a community. So I don't think that those two things have to be separate. They can intertwine.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think it is hard because I think a lot of us have experienced homophobia from religious people. And it doesn't mean that religious people are automatically going to be homophobic. But I think there are some mixed messages within the church, and it can be hard because, like everyone basically said, why can I not have my faith and have my identity as well? We shouldn't have to choose between those, but it can be hard to find a building that's focused on faith that is truly, truly accepting and doesn't just say, oh, I don't care, I don't judge you for who you, whatever, but you know that they do. So that can be really hard. So I appreciate everybody sharing that.
Real quick.
Sure.
It's like my other mom says all the time when she talks about, because she grew up in a very like Southern Baptist style household too. I know my mom can agree on me with this one, but she likes to say that, you know, your relationship with God is your own relationship, and like no one can take that away from you. So just because you don't go to church doesn't mean you can't have a relationship. So you just always want to keep focused on your relationship with God and how that can really impact you, and not how those who go to church impact you.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, like you said, your relationship with God or whatever you believe doesn't have to be, no one has to know about it. It's your own relationship and your own experience. Just like your experience, your relationship with, you know, somebody that you love. It's between you and that person. It doesn't have to do with anybody else, as long as you're not harming anybody else. So I do have a question specifically for Ansley and Morgan. How do your parents currently advocate for you or not advocate for your LGBTQ identity specifically, either maybe at school or in clubs or in your community, if that makes sense?
I think my mom does a pretty good job at advocating for the community, as a part of the community herself. She does a lot of work with students in her school that come to her, so she's a great outlet for those who might need it. And she also works with like the teen center at her school to find like outlets for those. And she always pushes me to advocate for myself. So I definitely know I'm being supported, and I make sure that those who don't feel like they're supported are supported. So I think she does a great job.
My parents really aren't hands-on when it comes to my queerness. So I would say they don't. Like, to answer that question, I would say they don't necessarily outwardly advocate. They don't have any outward resentment, but I know for a fact, just because of how they may have treated the communities in the past, specifically my dad, if I wasn't who I am, and if I hadn't announced it, came out, whatever you want to call it, when I did, I would still be experiencing that. And my parents, since they did not support it, I definitely experienced a lot of internalized homophobia and a lot of internalized homophobic tendencies, which, you know, messed up my mental for a little bit. But I would say that they are trying. They are slowly trying. So I would say it's the thought that counts. Yeah.
I know this question was not for me, but I grew up in a house that was not supportive. And what that meant for me personally was that I hid like large parts of who I was for a really long time. And I think I grew up in the Midwest where, you know, we don't talk about things and we don't rock the boat and we hate conflict and all that kind of thing. Not to like blanket the Midwest, but that was the family that I grew up in. And at the time, I think I told myself that I was doing what was better, because I was taught that, you know, that kind of conflict was sort of worse. But in reality, what it meant was that my mom had sort of no idea who I really was. She didn't understand me or my life. And there was this sort of wall that got built between us. And it was sort of brick by brick. So I didn't even realize that I don't even know that she knew, you know, it was happening. Like we were both of us adding bricks to it with it sort of out even realizing. And that became harder and harder to overcome. And so, you know, I think it's just one of those things where even if we, you know, that for any parent, if we want our children to feel comfortable coming to us for all the things, then, you know, it's so important to show that we are supportive of them and that we'll love them always, and that there isn't, you know, nothing that they can do is going to change that, because it took just like one or two things that my mom said where I was like, oh, okay, well, that's it then. And just like shoved that away, not away because it was who I was, but like hid it, right? Like I would leave my house and put on like rainbow things and then take them off before I got home, and refer to people specific ways, and lie, you know, when I left for college, like literally lie about things that I was doing, activities that I was involved in. And you know, she would call and I'd be like at Pride, and I would just be like, not picking up. So, you know, it just is, I think we think about, like, as parents, what's happening in that moment, but we don't think about what that choice leads to down the line, and all of the kind of repercussions and consequences of that decision, and what that can mean for our relationship with our child and our child's relationship with us.
Yeah, thank you. And I think, as you can kind of see with the differences in Morgan and Ansley's experiences, having parents who support you, and then Elise as well, feeling like, well, if my parents not going to support me, then I'm going to hide it from them or lie to them about it. Because you're not going to change who you are, because you can't choose who you're attracted to or who you love. That's just who it is. Do heterosexual people choose to be heterosexual? I mean, maybe they do because of internalized homophobia, but most of the time it's just how your body responds, the physical body response. So at the end of the day, I think even if we don't understand, if we want our children to come to us to talk to us, either because they're scared or they're hurt, or maybe because they're in love, we just want our children to be fully themselves with us, then you have to show them that we care and that we're there for them, even if we don't understand. Because sometimes at the end of the day, it's not really about understanding, it's just about respecting and being there. So I want to ask Heather a question now. So Heather, as a parent who's also a part of the LGBTQ plus community, have you and how have you dealt with challenges from other parents because of, or community members? I mean, you talked about the church already, but maybe other community events you've been to because you and or because your child are a part of the LGBTQ community.
Well, I can say the one thing that I always strive to do is seek for understanding, right? You can't just assume anything about anybody. And oftentimes not knowing something can end up being, you think that they, perceive things a different way. But people train you, they teach you how they are. Like, listen to their character. It'll come out. And I have had to cut off friendships myself. Where, for example, one of my very good friends, she was actually in my wedding. Her husband has really horrible things to say about me and my wife all the time. And when I say horrible things, it's just inappropriate things that I don't appreciate. And if I were a heterosexual couple, the things that he was saying wouldn't have been a part of the conversation. And so even as an adult, I've had to make I had to have that conversation and tell my friend, like, listen, I want to be your friend, but I can't have this part in my family and in my life, because at the end of the day, I am a role model for my children, and I need to express to them and show them what I am willing to accept in my life and what I'm not. And being able to have those courageous conversations, if that relationship has expired, we grow up, we grow out. And sometimes things that used to fit don't fit anymore. Being an advocate, I also really like to have that open relationship with my children. You know, I have a teenage boy and then Ainsley and a toddler. And I want to be the role model. I want to be able to mirror what it means to be a good human. And that's all I think we're wanting from other people, is just be kind. Just be kind. I really follow life with knowing you really don't understand the baggage that someone else is carrying, and that could be anything. You know, we're specifically talking about gender identity, sexuality right now, but it could be anything. You don't know what everyone's carrying. We just don't. So be kind. It's free. It's free to be kind. I appreciate the fact that my relationship with my kids are so open. We talk about everything. And it's like the older that they get, the more open we get. And I love that. And I'm so fortunate to have that kind of relationship. And I know I see it with Ainsley's friends, that not all her friends have that kind of relationship with their moms and or parent or dads. And it's just having an outlet and being able to be a resource for other people makes me happy. I like to be that person where they can say, wow, you're successful, you can do it. It's just, there's so many things that we're told we can't, and but you can. So to be that role model, to be the advocate, and to be kind are all really important to me.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, and I think you brought up some important points, and specifically of well, two I'm thinking of. One is, you know, the older your children get, the more they're able to become closer to you and be honest and open with you. Whereas with a lot of people I know, I felt like this sometimes when I was younger, that the older I got, the more I wanted to hide things from my parents as well, because I felt like I couldn't just talk to them. So again, if we want our youth, our children, to come to us when they need help, to come to us when they're sad, to come to us when they're happy, we have to show them that we love them and support them regardless of who they love. And then, yes, the importance of having role models. You know, when youth see people that look like them or love like them, then they realize, oh, I can do this too. And it's not that, you know, we talked about this in the last one. I think a lot of times people, you know, might be afraid of if we see media or read books that talk about lesbians or trans people or whatever, then that means our child is going to be that way. But in reality, having books or movies or TV shows that show LGBTQ plus couples or people, it doesn't make people be that way. It shows people that they can be that way and can live happily. And yeah, so I don't know if that makes sense. But one final question for Elise. I think it's just one more. Yes. Before we get to our Q&A box, is as a youth serving professional, why is it important? I mean, we've talked about this a lot, but for in your opinion, why is it important for family members, schools, religious communities to advocate for LGBTQ plus youth and their families?
Well, I think first I would say, I think families have to do so much of the advocating that it's really lovely to think about what it means to be an ally, not just of LGBTQ young people, but of their families as well. That means their siblings, their parents, right? Everyone who's in their family. And that means people who are not part of that family unit stepping up for those families, right? And saying, this is our community and we want everyone to feel welcome in our community and safe in our community, that every young person deserves to have a safe space, that families deserve to be able to go to the grocery store, to go to the library, to go, you know, to all of the places that everyone gets to go to without, you know, fearing harassment or violence or, you know, or anything else. And that not just the absence of bad things, but to feel, you know, accepted and loved and welcome places. And I, you know, we know, like, I feel like all we hear in the news these days, maybe this is just my world, is that, you know, young people are struggling, and we know that LGBTQ plus young people are struggling even more. And so it's, you know, kind of, if the rest of the community doesn't step up, then it's like putting all of that on the parents, which is just not, you know, it takes a village is a statement that we have in our culture for a reason, even if we don't always actually sort of embody that. But I really do feel like, you know, youth need to see that their teachers, that their, you know, the people in their community support who they are. And I think a lot of the times it can feel, of course, it can feel scary. And I'd love, you know, I offer myself as a resource for how to work through that potential fear. But I think one of the reasons that it can feel scary is that the positioning of everything right now is sort of this, the kind of dominant narrative has been, oh, well, this is like new and different and weird, and we need to go back to the way things used to be. And so I'm gonna like get on a soapbox for a second and say that that is completely and totally false. And that, in fact, in the earliest recorded history of humanity in Mesopotamia, we see recordings of multiple genders beyond like the gender binary. We see written down many different types of genders and sexual orientations. We see it all over the world throughout history. So this idea that like this is this new weird thing that needs to be stopped is just not true. And so in fact, when we step up for the rights of LGBTQ young people and families, we are like joining together with the literally thousands of cultures throughout the history of human life on this planet to say we get to be here, right? And we want to create communities that honor all of us. And we have so many examples of ways that that has been done in the past and has been done in other parts of the world that we can look to, which is really beautiful. Like, we're not just fighting this fight now in this moment on our own. We have lots and lots of different things that we can connect to and use as examples.
Yes, I love that. And that made me think about there is, like you said, not only all over the world, but here in the United States, pre-colonialism, there's proof that the United States, there were more genders or more sexualities. And then once, you know, that person sailed the ocean blue, everything shifted. So just kind of thinking about how this is not new. Being a non-binary, being trans, being lesbian, being queer, it's not new. It's just new that the government wants to control it so badly. Or is it new? I don't know. It's just more in our faces, maybe. So thank you all, my amazing panelists. So we have some questions from our guests, from our attendees. So somebody asked, can you still love somebody who is LGBTQ? Can you be a religious person and you still love somebody that's LGBTQ, but not support that part of them?
I've been thinking a lot about this question since the person shared it in the chat. Thank you for sharing it. And I think sort of where I landed was that, at least for me, loving someone means that they can feel safe with us. And I'm guessing that other folks might agree that it's pretty much impossible to feel safe with someone who doesn't agree with who you fundamentally are as a person and human being. So to me, then what that means is that, you know, a genuine love for someone and a disagreement with who they fundamentally are as a person can't go hand in hand. I would be curious to hear what other folks have to say.
I agree. I mean, coming from like someone who's heard like your own like I used to I used to be a cheerleader, and I knew one of the girls, and her friend was gay, and it was this ongoing thing that her friend was scared to come out to her really dear friend, because she's one of those people that is like, I love you, but I don't support your decision to be gay. Like, that's a decision to make. And I feel like I personally believe like you don't love the person, because if you did, you wouldn't like have like being gay as like a title over them. Like, it's something that controls their life when it's just who they are. So it's not like people like to make like these labels and put them like big and bold, and like have to, this person is gay this, gay that. So that's not who the person is. Yes, that might be who they are, but it's not like their personality and what they want to express to the world. So I don't want that to be like a leading characteristic of someone. If you love them, you love them. I mean, it's not like I don't support you just because that's my beliefs. It's you just love them. So it's my personal opinion.
I also want to answer this question. To me, the way I've always thought of love has no bounds. Love loves you when you're good, when you're bad. So I would say no. I would say no, because there shouldn't be any exception to the love or any condition to the love. Like, hey, I love my best friend, but there shouldn't be a but to that part, because as a family, best friend, everything, you're supposed to just treat everybody with respect and dignity. And that can't be anything conditional. Love isn't something that's conditional. So if your love comes with conditions, that's not love. That's not love. It may be care and compassion, but care and compassion are not called love for certain reasons. So that's what I had to say about that.
And my 2 cents, again, it's about giving grace. My family's very unique in saying that my mother is not the most outwardly supporting person. She supports to the best of her ability. And I have to give her grace for that. She comes with her own baggage and her life experiences with, the queer population back in the 70s and 80s, and her, all that baggage that she carries, her lived experience that she carries, her Catholic upbringing that she carries. And now, sadly, she goes to a church that doesn't affirm her daughter or her granddaughter, and it infuriates me. She, every once in a while, she has the toddler, she'll say, can I bring, do you guys want to come to church? And I allow her to bring the toddler to church, and that will be expiring probably in the next year, because when my toddler starts understanding more, I don't want her to be around non-affirming church people. I know that sounds really horrible to say church people like that, but that kind of environment, because that's not all churches. That's not how I want her to be growing up in the faith-based beliefs. So you have to decide what you're willing to accept from other people, and what fits for you may not fit for the next person. What do you feel comfortable with, and how far are you willing to bend the rules? Like I previously said about my friend, one of my very, very close friends, I had to end that friendship because of the way that her husband treated my wife and myself. But I'm not going to treat my mom that way because when my mom is with me, she's super supportive, and what she does in her church is what she does in her church, right? So I think it's not, as with everything, it's not a one size fits all kind of situation.
Thank you. So another question, someone asked, my child gets really upset when I get her pronouns wrong. I'm really trying, but sometimes I slip up. Where to go? I missed it. How can I help her see that I'm trying? Do I need to say it again?
I think that what you just said is what that you're trying. And give grace. And with anything comes time, understanding, reflection, practice. And that's support, just acknowledging the fact, like, hey, this is the pronoun. That's just acknowledging that is support. So I think baby steps and allowing yourself the time to work through it and to be authentic with your child and say just that, we're not perfect.
Yeah, coming from someone who does mess up my best friend's pronouns quite a few times, as long as you have good intentions behind it, as long as you're not doing it intentionally, you're trying. Everybody does things on their own timeline, but as long as you're trying, that's all that really matters.
Yeah, completely agree. I mean, I think we, everybody is working on things. We all make mistakes if we're trying. I think that's the most important thing. I think also that, gender is one of the fundamental ways that we organize the world right now, the culture that we live in. And so our brains are really, really used to kind of taking shortcuts on gender. And pronouns are one of those things, right? Where we see someone and our brain just kind of, it's like a domino effect where like they have this and they look like this. So, and we kind of just like, our brains just knock down all the rest of the dominoes of who we feel like they are. And so part of pronouns can just be habit, right? And we need to switch a habit. But also I think part of pronouns is, how do we see that person? Like deep inside ourselves, how do we see them? Because if we see them as, right, if we see them as the gender that they feel themselves to be, then our brains will knock down all the dominoes for those pronouns. And again, I'm not, it's a work in progress, and we have to change habits and all of those things. But I think a piece of it too is that if someone identifies as male and somewhere in our, in our brain, we sort of see them as female, which is maybe how we used to see them, of course we're going to struggle with their pronouns. Like, how could we not, right? That's what our brain is so used to doing. So what is the work that we need to do internally to get to the place where we see them as they see themselves? And it will make the pronoun piece easier.
Yes, beautiful. Thank you both for answering that. I think our society is so gender binary. Male, female, blue is boy, pink is girl, short hair is boy, long hair is girl. From the moment before you're even born, what is it? Gender reveal party. But we are, like Morgan said, we need to come from a place of actually trying, actually wanting to respect them. Oh, fun fact, England, pink was for boys, blue is for girls. I love that. I had no idea. Yeah, so everything you all said, love it. Okay, so one more question. from the Q&A box, kind of going back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of religion. I'm looking up here because I have another screen up there. Put it down here. Can you love a Christian who does not agree with who you are as LGBTQ plus?
I would say yes, because I don't know how to word this, but you have to understand people come from different time periods and they've experienced different things. They may have traumas associated. They may have traumas associated with the LGBT community. They may have been harmed from someone in the past. So it may take them longer to understand, and it may take them, they may still hold grudges and age-old traumas, but that doesn't mean they love you any less. That just means they've been through stuff, and like, it's not right for them to take it out on you, but at the end of the day, people don't get their traumas addressed, but that doesn't mean they don't love you any less. So yeah, like I still love my dad. I still live with my dad. I still live, laugh, love with him. So I would say it is possible for you to love someone who you don't necessarily feel completely supported by, or like family that you don't necessarily feel completely supported by.
Yeah, I mean, I love my mom deeply. And I think, I love this question because I think in some way, this question is asking, like, can you see beyond this part of my identity to the completeness and wholeness and complexity of who I am as a human being? And, I think the answer to that is yes. And I would also say, I think that's exactly what LGBTQ people are asking for as well, right? Can you see beyond the label to who I am, just me as a person, as a human being who deserves, just as anyone else does, to love and be happy and walk down the street without fear, and all of these pieces. So I would say yes for that reason.
That was beautiful, both of what you said. I think it's a great place to end our lovely, beautiful, amazing webinar. I can get out a few minutes early, but before anybody goes, I'm going to put a thingy in the chat, a post test. If you all can please take this short, very quick survey to let us know how we did today. I'm so glad you all came tonight and you stayed the whole time. So hopefully that means you were interested in learning something new. And I like this thing also. So before you put it, wait till I finish the directions, but think about one word that describes how you feel now after you've had this webinar. And after I count down from 3, then we can all put it in the chat. So it's kind of like a, I think what Elise called it, the waterfall. So I'll give you like 5 seconds to think of one word to put in the chat. And then I'll count down from 3 and we'll press enter. So one word, how you feel now after this webinar. And I'm going to start counting down now. 3, 2, 1. I love it. Look at all these. Yay. Awesome. Okay, thank you, everyone. Please take that survey before you go. It'll be quick and it'll help us know how we did, how we can do better next time. And we'll see you all soon. We'll also be sending out an email with the recording of the webinar and some resources as well, a resource list. Have a good night.